Hi everyone, welcome to the Ask Dr. Khan show. This is episode 130 and I'm so excited to be speaking with you today because we're going to talk about inflammation and the vicious cycle it creates. Now a lot of people that come to me with chronic autoimmune issues and they have chronic signs of inflammation. Things like brain fog and joint pain and fatigue and insulin resistance, inability to lose weight. These are all signs of inflammation that may not be so obvious. It does not always result in just overt pain. Inflammation actually persists throughout the body systemically and can manifest many different ways. So today we're going to talk about the inflammation and the vicious cycle it presents and how we can break that vicious cycle. So let's start with cytokines. So, we have things like cytokines. So let's put a title here: inflammation and vicious cycle. Okay, so we have increased cytokines. So cytokines are cellular messengers of the immune system. So these are immune cells texting each other to tell each other that, hey, there's an injury here, there's an infection here, send more soldier to this area. Cytokines are the one that does that. So these guys will trigger an inflammation response. We also have things like oxidative stress. So think of oxidative stress as reactions in your body as a result of some type of oxidizing activity. So think of iron. Iron rusts. The rusting is because of oxidation, because oxygen is a very damaging molecule. When things come in contact with oxygen, they oxidize, and that's why butter goes rancid and iron rusts. But that same oxidation process happens inside your body just by the virtue of you burning oxygen for fuel, right? You breathe in oxygen, use that to make energy. We create oxidation. Kind of like burning gasoline, you get gasoline emissions. We get that inside our body. So by virtue of breathing air, we create this damage, oxidative stress, which is what causes aging. And this is the same reason why you take antioxidant, fight oxidation. That's what antioxidants are for. So if you have increased oxidative stress, it means you're more inflamed. Some kind of chemical, something you're reacting to in the environment is creating this, then you're going to become more inflamed and have more problem. Another thing is increased environmental triggers. Now, environmental triggers, meaning things in your environment. What are some of these things? Food, right? Food is something you introduce into your body, so it's a part of our environment. So you can make good food choices or you can make poor food choices. There's no such thing as okay food choices. It's either good or bad. So you have to make a choice. Is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? Always made a good choice, right? Food. We also have environmental chemicals. So these are things like plastic, right, in the food beverage containers. We have pesticide residues in non-organic foods. We have fire retardant material. We have things like heavy metal toxicity. So there's a lot of chemical in our environment. Lastly, we also have infection. That's something from the environment that can infect us and create increased cytokine load and increased oxidative stress. So all these things go into feeding into this thing, and we've been talking about it in the last few weeks on the Ask Dr. Khan show. The NF-kappaB, nuclear factor kappaB, okay? This nuclear factor kappaB is a protein that are transcription factor proteins. So this is found in every single cell in your body, and their job is like a sentry, like a bodyguard, not a bodyguard, more like someone that are standing at the front door looking at who's coming into the environment. And when this senses these things, these sensor or these protein will get triggered, say, oh wow, I have some kind of inflammatory process. Let's tell my DNA to start producing things. What does it produce? It'll produce inflammation. In fact, one of the things that it produces is inflammatory cytokines, these cellular messengers, because it's your body's way of alarming itself to say, hey, there's an injury over here, send some soldiers to that area. So nuclear factor kappaB is a protein found in your cell that triggers DNA to do a certain set of action to trigger this inflammatory response, which is to protect you, to fight some kind of outside invader. And what happens is this nuclear factor kappaB, or NF-kappaB, has a self-amplifying loop. Amplifying loop. What does that mean? That means the more NF-kappa B you have, the more it has, the more it triggers itself. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more inflamed you are, the more inflamed you become, unless you get rid of the triggers and you calm this whole system down. You can do that with nutraceuticals, nutritional compounds. Okay? You can't do that very well with a drug, but you can do it very well with a nutritional compound. But even taking a nutritional supplement, if you don't get rid of the underlying trigger, which is the food that you eat every day, you're going to just continue to trigger this self-amplifying loop, and it doesn't matter how much nutrition you dump on it, you're still throwing fire into the forest. You're going to start a forest fire, and it doesn't matter how much firefighter you put on the scene. If you keep starting forest fires, it's not going to help, right? So what happens is you create this vicious cycle. Not only this reinforces itself, and the pathway becomes more and more efficient at triggering inflammation. So the next time you come into contact with something that triggers inflammation, you don't need as much to trigger the same amount of inflammation. So it gets worse over time. So this is a bad situation. Now what happens is when you have increased NF-kappa B, what it also creates, or what it leads to, is you get small intestine tight junction breakdown. Tight junction. So these are the intestinal cell linings that line your intestinal tract, and with these tight junctions encounter these NF-kappa B and all the inflammatory cytokines it produces, it creates a tight junction breakdown. The linings start to degrade, and that's going to lead into what we call leaky gut. Now that's the layman's term, but really what it should be called is called hyper leaky gut, because we all have leaky gut. It's part of normal to have leaky gut. It's a normal cellular process for your gut lining to be leaky and not leaky. Leaky and not leaky. It comes back, right? It's when it becomes hyper leaky and never comes back to normal. It's like the door in your front door. You can open it once in a while to let air in, but if you leave it on all day 24/7, bugs and animals are going to crawl in. That's not good. Once in a while, open to let guests come in and out is fine. That's what leaky gut is. It's really a hyper leaky gut that's a problem, not leaky gut itself. A lot of people have hyper leaky gut, and NF-kappa B self-amplifying loop can trigger this process. And what happens is this will create more NF-kappa B activation and create more leaky gut. Becomes another vicious cycle. Another thing that can happen is that this can trigger impaired detoxification. Okay? Detox. Because what happens is when you produce all these junk, these oxidative stress, these cytokines, and these environmental triggers like chemical, food, and so forth, you create a lot of these particles that's floating around that triggers inflammation. That's like the byproduct. It's like you're killing off the bad guy. You got just the dead limbs, floating around, and that's a load on the liver to detox. So what happens is you're going to overload that system and create impaired biotransformation. Okay, so in scientific term, we don't call it detox, we call it biotransformation. So if you want to get a golden star from me, you'll start saying biotransformation instead of detox, okay? Biotransformation. If you look up in scientific literature, we don't call it detox, we call it biotransformation. So let's all use the right terminology to describe the right things. Now, when you have impaired biotransformation, what happens is this creates more NF-kappa B activation, becomes another self-amplifying loop or a vicious cycle. So now you have leaky gut, you don't detox well. Next, what happens is if you have this NF-kappa B issue, is that you can have impaired fat utilization. Oh my gosh, are we talking about difficulty losing weight? How many of you experience difficulty losing weight? Just put in the comment section, I can't lose weight. Just so you see how often this happens, despite you eating well. Maybe you're eating perfect, you're eating paleo, you're cutting out the sugar. You still can't lose that last 5, 10 extra pounds, because when you have this inflammation process, there's a enzyme called the hormone sensitive lipase. And this enzyme actually breaks down fat. But what happens is when you have this inflammatory vicious cycle going, It's going to block this hormone-sensitive lipase from working, and therefore you can't burn fat. And that's why you can't lose weight, independent of your diet, independent of your macro. So you go to personal trainer, they're tracking your macro, they say, hey, you're burning this much calorie a day, or we're having you exercise this much calorie, it should create a caloric deficit, you should lose weight, but you're not. Because it has nothing to do with calorie in, calorie out. See, hormones are stronger than diet. Immune system function is stronger than diet. If you're inflamed and your hormones not working, it doesn't matter what you eat or how much calorie, the calculation is all skewed. So you cannot calculate that way. You got to address the underlying problem. Now, once you have this problem with fat, you're also going to have problem with impaired insulin function. Okay, you're going to start to have impaired insulin signaling. Okay, it's not a quantity problem. You can make the right amount of insulin. It's just a signaling of that insulin. How that's signaling your cell to uptake glucose is not working. It gets disrupted. And what that's going to lead into is insulin resistance, which is another big fat reason, no pun intended, of why you can't lose weight. So not only you get this hormone-sensitive lipase that gets blocked so you can't burn fat, you also get impaired insulin signaling, which leads to insulin resistance. And that insulin resistance further stimulates the NF-kappaB self-amplifying. So that creates another vicious cycle. So everything feeds back into this NF-kappaB and creates more inflammation. And that's why you can't calm it down. Because what happens is, even if you get rid of these, I'm going to be a good boy and a good girl now. I'm going to cut out the bad food. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to eat better. But now your system is so wound up on these other dysfunction that even you cut out these triggers, the trigger's no longer present, your system's still ramped up on the self-amplifying. You're inflamed, even though there's no more trigger for that initial inflammation. And that's what happens. And what happens, one of the things that happens is, through all this process, because you're so inflamed and you have oxidative stress, you start to get glutathione depletion. You deplete your glutathione level. Remember, we talked about in previous videos, if you haven't watched it, go back to the previous episode of the Ask Dr. Khan Show. We're on Facebook Live every Monday, about 12:30 today, 12:30 Arizona time. And also we're on YouTube. There's over 500 videos on my YouTube channel at Peter Khan DC. You want to sign up to both. Subscribe and like to both places because you get the live content and then you're going to get the recorded content. But in the future, we're going to start putting out different content in different platforms. So it behooves you to sign up for different places. But glutathione is an intracellular antioxidant. Remember oxidative stress? That's why you take antioxidant. Glutathione is an antioxidant that's produced inside of every cell in your body. It's even more important than vitamin C, more important than CoQ10, these antioxidants. This is the most important, the master antioxidant, especially in people with autoimmune. You become depleted even more because with autoimmune, you use up more glutathione. So you get glutathione depletion, and what that leads into is INOS, and we talked about this last week, inducible nitric oxide synthase, which is an enzyme that produces a gas called nitric oxide. And the inducible type creates damage, tissue destruction. Not good, right? To have tissue destruction. This is where people with rheumatoid arthritis, you should see the joint deformity. It's caused by INOS. In hashimotos, where the thyroid gland swells up, you get thyroid gland destroyed, it's the INOS. It's the INOS that's mediating the actual tissue destruction, that's doing the damage. It's like, this is the hitman, and this is the mafia boss. They're giving out orders, but these guys carry out the destruction. So you can mediate these at different steps. So I would say the most important thing right here for most people, okay, and it's probably also the safest thing to do, is to supply glutathione. I'm going to use blue. Blue means good, okay? How about this? Let's use green. Green means green light. Green, that is important, okay, because you all need it. Even if you're completely healthy, you cannot go wrong with taking glutathione. It's helpful for anti-aging as well because it helps block oxidative stress, and oxidative stress is what causes aging. So this has anti-aging capability. Glutathione comes in many different forms. Typically out in the market, we have reduced glutathione, and we're going to write GSH for glutathione, shorthand, okay? reduced glutathione, that doesn't absorb orally very well. So then we have to use liposomal, which is a fat-based liquid, as a carrier to protect the glutathione so it doesn't break down. Then we came out with a better form of it called acetyl glutathione. Acetyl, GSH, because the acetyl form can actually enter the cell intact without having to break it down, because the reduced glutathione, your body breaks it down into its individual amino acid, and your body has to reassemble it once inside the cell. So it takes more chemical step, and some people just don't do that very well. The acetyl form gets straight into the cell intact without being broken down. So much greater efficacy, much greater absorption, rivals IV, getting an injection of glutathione, which is, costs money, much more expensive. It's also a pain in the butt, no pun intended, and you have to go somewhere. This is much more easier to do at home, acetyl glutathione. So what we have come up with is a breakthrough in technology where we're doing what's called, gosh, this is so good. I'm going to erase this, because this is going to erase this whole NF-kappaB loop right here. It's going to get rid of that. Poof. What's called is Glutathione Synergy. Okay? What's so cool about this? Synergy meaning we're using different types of glutathione combined in one form. For the first time, there's something like this. Because acetylglutathione get intracellular, get inside the cell. This is where it has the most potential to benefit you as far as wiping out that NF-kappaB. This whole inflammatory pathway that we talk about. That does that. But we still want the reduced glutathione, even though it gets broken down, not allowed to get into the cell, but we want that in the blood because the reduced glutathione, when it's circulating in the blood, what happens? It acts as a detoxifier. Remember, impaired detox, biotransformation? The reduced glutathione can help with that and decrease the overall toxic load. It's a great chemical binder. In fact, it's part of the phase 2 liver detox pathway, glutathione conjugation using glutathione. So the reduced glutathione can do that. And we're also delivering both the acetyl and the reduced in a liposomal form, which protects the glutathione for even better absorption. And lastly, we add a little bit of NAC, N-acetylcysteine. This is a precursor for glutathione. So we're giving your body the building block to make its own too, all wrapped in the liposomal delivery. Now the thing is, glutathione is a sulfur molecule. It tastes like and smells like rotten egg. So some people just can't tolerate the taste. So what we have done is a breakthrough in the formulation where it tastes actually good, not just like a fake good, like poopery kind of good, like you're in a bathroom, it's like you spray some scent, but you still smell the poop, it's kind of trying to make it taste good. No, this is actually good. So you can actually tolerate kids, great for people who have like taste sensitivity. This actually tastes good. And because of the efficacy, we find that people have to use less dosage. In the past, when I used reduced glutathione in the liposomal form, I may have to use up to 15, 20 milliliter per day. In the pill form of acetylglutathione, which we have, we may have to use up to 4 capsules a day, even more. With the Glutathione Synergy, we can get therapeutic dose at 2 teaspoons a day. And maintenance dose, typically 1 teaspoon. There's certainly some applications, some people, they're so inflamed that we need to give them more, but typically we're seeing an overall less dosage, which is much more elegant way of doing it. So I'm super excited about it, and you can find this product at our online store at Neurometabolic Supplements. Guess what? Right now, we're actually having a Halloween sale, a pre-Halloween sale, right now all the way through October 31st. So let me put this here. So use the code HOCUS is a discount code at our online store where you can get 15% off. Be a great chance for you to try Glutathione Synergy to see how you like the taste and see how it works for you. But also any other product across the entire store, 15% off. Go to neurometabolicsupplements.com. I'll put the link in the post and use this discount code HOCUS to get 15% off your order. It's only from now until October 31st. We don't do sale that much. This is your chance to give it a shot. So thank you so much for watching. Please share this video with people who you think can benefit. There's so many people that need to hear this, that there's things that they can do with autoimmune. Anybody with autoimmune, with chronic inflammation, with thyroid problem, chronic fatigue, they need to hear this information. Please help me blast this out on Facebook and on YouTube to share with as many people as possible. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week at the Ask Dr. Khan Show.